So from the other previous videos, we've looked at two-point perspective sketching with a ruler and then freehand and breaking down the box to create a floating box. So in this one now, we're going to have a look at dividing the box up and using the divisions and the guidelines that we have to start looking at curving and rounding corners. Now, when you do this kind of work, you really need to press lightly with the pencil because there's going to be a lot of lines, and actually a lot of it is going to be, you wouldn't rub it out, but you don't want it to be seen, so we must press lightly. So what I mean in terms of dividing the box up, so I'm going to sketch a box here, so let's just start off by sketching. So I'm actually going to do this to help myself on this. I'm going to just move my feet around very quickly to sketch my initial shapes. So here we go, as you can see, here's the first box. I'm going to, as if you watched the last video, flatten my sheet ever so slightly for the top of the box, as you can see, something like that. Okay, turn my page round because I'm just trying to keep the same angle for my sketching all the time. That one's a little bit funny, but okay, and let's just get this one here. Okay, so that one, yep, pretty happy with that as a sort of perspective box. Then I'm just going to add in a couple more very quickly, so you'll see me now. Here's another one. Okay, so there's my angle. Okay, and of course, as I previously mentioned, we can change angles because actually that will make some of the boxes look a bit more dynamic, a little bit more interesting on a page if we look at changing the angles. You can see on this one, actually, I'm doing it slightly different. I'll just make this one longer here. Okay, whoops, that line's slightly wrong. Get that there, and probably something, okay, something like that. Okay, so there's another box. Okay, strangely, this one, as you can see, there's just almost meeting, but it's not, and that's ideally what we want. So one of the things that we can do is starting to look at add rounds and add shapings to the box, and we do that by using some guidelines and grid lines. If I start with this one here, and I'm going to put 2 points on the box, almost like a sandwich like we've done before, and if I just sketch to the vanishing point, okay, my vanishing point off the page, and I do the same on this side, so I'll just sketch in. Okay, so we've got our 3 divisions. Then what I'm going to look at doing is making a decision on the top face here, this top face, and I'm just going to make another line, okay? Something like that. So it's going to give me a point here and a point there. What I'm going to do now is drop that down as a vertical line. Drop it down as a vertical line. Okay, like so. And where this one is here, we're just going to come across, okay, as though we're going to the vanishing point. That's clearly missing. I got my angle wrong, so it looks about there. Okay, and then what we're going to do is have a look at joining these 2 points here. So it's as though we're saying that the top then becomes smaller. So I'm going to do a line like so. I'm going to keep that line in, but then on this side, we're going to make a cut. What we want to then do is continue these lines across. So we know that this middle bit, here and here, is like the full width. And so we can actually pencil that one in there. But then what we want to do is join this one to this point here, something like that, and this point to this bottom point. Okay, so which is why we just created that shape. But what you can see now is clearly that is wrong. I didn't want to join it to there. I actually want to join it to this one, which was this vanishing point line here with this dropped vertical line. So that's where you've got to be really careful. That's the mistake that lots of students make to begin with. Okay, so it's looking carefully and making those decisions. We'll do the same for the back of the box, again, to make that more interesting. So I'm going to drop a line here, vertical line. Okay, then what we're going to have a look at doing is continuing that line along the top if we want to, just like we did on this side here, so you can see like that. But the difference this time is we will use the current top face, we'll use that corner there, and we're going to come in to meet this line here. So we'll just draw a diagonal line there, we'll keep a straight line down, and we'll do a diagonal line here at the bottom, like so, and then let's join it together. So let's just darken our lines. We'll keep this one quite light because we always try to keep like the inner lines a little bit lighter than the outer lines. And you can see now, I hope, that we've got a shape which is sketched in 2-point perspective, but we're trying to break it away from the blockiness of that. However, one of the things that you'll notice is that it still does look very blocky. So I'm going to try and do a subtle thing now, which is just add in some rounded corners on. We're going to draw something very similar again. So if I just add on 2 points as I did last time, and let's just sketch those to where my vanishing points would be, approximately something like that. And then we'll do it on this side. Okay, so as you see at the moment, it's actually quite uneven what I've got. So clearly what I need to do is bring this line here a little bit further down. So we'll sketch that one again. Okay, let me get my angle perhaps a little better, something like that. As you can see, I've got on this box way more severe in terms of its shape. That's because my bottom line was actually really quite angled. So if I flatten that slightly to become like that, this will actually make a little bit more sense overall. So you can see by me doing this that I've got lots and lots of lines already, and it can be quite messy, which is why it's really, really important to press lightly when you're 2-point perspective sketching. Okay, so kind of happy like that. And then we're going to do something similar to before. I'm just going to do a line coming across here on the top face. I'm going to do that, drop that line down here to my bottom face there. I'm going to connect that to the vanishing point, and again, I'm going to drop that down vertically. So I've got that point there. So now what I want to do, like just before, we're going to connect that over here. We've got this point here, and we're going to connect to the top, just like we did previously. We're going to do that one there, and here. Okay, like so. Okay, so those are kind of plotting in the lines, and we can do something similar on the back as well. So here is my line here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add vertical line about there. Looking at my point here, going across, that's a point there. So we'll pencil in. Okay, our lines. So that's our basic shape. But what I said on this one was we're going to look at rounding corners, and this is where we start, hopefully, pressing lightly. So we'll start at the back, and we'll just do a small arc on the back here. Now what we want to do is, if we do a similar thing on all of the edge corners, so like when two lines are meeting, if you give me my pencil, doesn't seem to want to play right now. Here we go. So I'm going to round this edge, then I'm going to round this one here. So all we're trying to do is soften the shape. Perhaps I might have to change my pencil. Okay, let's go to this one. Let's just soften. And this corner in particular is the difficult one. This is the near corner where you see the bigger changes. And yes, we're going to have quite an impact with this corner because it affects this one. And actually this becomes our light line when we come to render. Okay, and so incredibly important that we always keep this line here very, very light. So we're going to get the back corner. I'm going to round this back. I'm going to round in between, round the back corner. So just by adding these rounds on, we're going to start to change the shape from being what is very angular, very blocky, and whilst we're still dealing with a block, of course, we're trying to now get a much rounder, more fluid, perhaps more organic shape. Now this one, as I said before, becomes the critical one, this corner here. Okay, and actually what we'll have is this edge becomes ever so slightly rounded, like so. So we would have lines going up there and there, which would make a lot more sense when we start marker rendering. So if we continue to look at our 2-point perspective boxes with rounded edges, we'll take this to a further extreme. So what we're going to do is we're going to sketch out a very tall 2-point perspective box. So I'm going to, just for this purpose, turn my page round. So we're going to sketch along a line here, okay, which is going to be our corner. Then I'm going to, as previously, sketch my V shape for my lines to my vanishing point. It doesn't matter that those vanishing points are way off the page. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add on a couple more vertical lines for the sides of this box. Okay, so we'll do a line going up here, and of course what we're trying to do is get pretty much parallel lines. So then we're going to decide on where the top of the box is. So we'll get our center line here, our corner line. Going to make a mark on there, so we'll just put a point on there, and then what I'm going to do is again flatten out my perspective line. So let's flatten it a little bit more, perhaps something like that. Okay, going across there. Okay, like so we can see a difference. Let's flatten it out on this side. Okay, as though those are going to meet somewhere. If the angle is wrong, then let's flatten it out a little bit more. That looks like a better line. Okay, more of an angle. You can clearly see that they're going to meet. Then the top, okay, so what we're trying to do, there's our other line, so we need to be flatter again than this line. So from here, okay, something like that, and then finally from this line here going across. So we're just going to come across like that. So that gives us the top of the box and the bottom of the box, okay? And if I were just to put the bottom of the box in, you can see on here just something roughly like that, and I could of course do a vertical line at the back of the box. But what I want to do now is I'm going to sketch a smaller box at the top here, okay? So I'm just going to use these lines and actually draw parallel lines, pretty much parallel lines. So I'm going to add almost like a lip or an inner top part of my box. So I'm going to just add that on here, add it on here, and on the back. Okay, something like that. So we've got a smaller box, and as before, just going to find the center point. Okay, so this is our center of the top box. So we've got the bottom of the box here, and we've got the top of the box here. So what I'm going to do is just join those together. So I've got this corner point here now. So what I want to do is just draw a straight line. Let's do the same on this corner to this one. So we're going to sketch our line, something like that. And of course we've got our corner here coming down to our original corner. So we're trying to create a tapered shape. Now what we'll do is we'll look at what we've done just before, which is the rounding of the corners. So I'm going to get our new top of the box here, and on this corner here I'm just going to add a round. Okay, so we'll add quite a bigger round at that point. And then we're going to get to the back corner and we'll add a round onto the back. We're going to come across over here, okay, and again, just like on this side, we'll add a bigger round over there. So now we've got the top of our box here, as you can see, and we've rounded the edge apart from our front corner. So our front corner, we'll put the round in, but this is where we would use marker pens, and this is where we would have our light line, okay? Because what we're trying to do at this point is have this molded or this rounded shape. Let's do the same for the bottom of the box. So let's just follow our line and round that outer corner. Let's do the same on this one. So I'm just going to turn my page round because it's more natural. We're going to round this bottom edge as well, and then finally we'll round our front corner. So here's our front corner that's rounded. Now notice at the moment I'm not doing anything with these parts in between the rounds. I'm leaving them and the longer lines because we're actually going to modify those, trying to get it away from this looking like a block all the time. So this is our front corner, but of course we've got this quite bold line in here. Ideally we don't want that. What we actually want is from our round at the top and from our round here at the bottom, this is where we'd have our light line. So actually we would have lines and they would get slightly thinner as they get towards the top, like so. So then the last thing we're going to do is we're just going to try and add a bit more creative or organic form to here. So instead of keeping the line straight, we're just going to add a curve on here, on the bottom, to try and change the shape overall. And then we'll add a cut in just because we can, and it'll make it look a bit more interesting as a shape. So what I'm going to do is just turn my page around, just like so, and I'm just going to add a small curve in here, okay, between those two rounded points. I'm going to spin that round. We'll do the same on this side. Okay, so we're going to add a curve in. Now notice the way that I've moved my page round so that the arc that I'm sketching is this way, which is a more natural kind of pivot point. I've come too far in here from this round here, so I just need to modify and adapt my line, something like that. And I don't want to press too hard at the moment because I'm going to make a change here. And then finally, we'll do the same a little bit on the bottom here. So we're going to come in and out, same on this side. So we're changing the form perhaps a little bit more. We could, if we wanted to, actually ignore our corner point here. We can actually bring this a lot further out and join it over here if we wanted to. For this one right now, I'm just going to leave that. I'm going to add a little bit of our light line in at the top of the box here, and we'll do a little curve there for our light line at the side. And so what we're going to do now, I'm just going to finish off with adding a cut. Now we can add a cut in this side or this side. It doesn't matter how you decide to do this. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add, I'll do it on this side in this case, I'm just going to add a little cut here. So I'm going to do a line that's going to cut up onto this point. When it gets here, we'll actually make it curve round the object as well. So we'll curve round following our rounded shape, which will actually help map this surface. And we'll just go following our perspective probably now. We'll do it as though we're cut going this way, but I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. I'm just going to go part way. And then I'm going to add a second one. I'm going to deliberately do it so it's not parallel, so it's underneath here. And we'll add another curved line, go into our round shape. Let's get that curve, mapping the surface. And then we'll have this one coming up a little bit, something like that. Hopefully you can see that. And then I'm just going to finish that with, I can either do a vertical line here or I can map the side of my object. So we'll do something like the side. So we've got the same kind of contour shape. Now what I'm going to try and do is make this look as though it's like some material that's been removed. So for that to happen, what would happen here is that this line would actually just move inwards slightly because there's material been removed. So we'll get that same line, we'll follow it, a bit darker there, but it's going inside. Because we're looking down in 2-point perspective at this object, we could see the inside of this lip here. So what we will do is we will add a thickness of material by following the line that we sketched before. We're going to go round this corner and to this side over here. And because in 2-point perspective, we would see the inside of this side, we will copy that line there, okay? And we'd have our line to join the inside. So we've started to modify our form. So let's just pencil this in a little bit harder so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So I've got this corner, will come down with a weight of line. So I'm just going to press a little bit harder now to have a darker and sharper line to show my sketch. I'm going to turn that round. So darker and sharper to define the line. Okay, to here. If we turn that round again, you should be able to see that. Then we'll just add in on the side. We'll come back to define our line here. So darker here. And then, of course, what's going to happen is we're going to go back to our original line and we'll round that little corner. Okay, and we're just going to define this round to the bottom of our object. So all we need to do now is just make sure it's clear that we have a thickness of material. So we're just going to add, we're going to keep this line quite light and a little bit more delicate, but this line on the inside can become a little bit harder because it's where two surfaces are meeting and there'll probably be a little bit of shadow. So we're just going to add it in. It doesn't matter if the thickness changes a little bit, this is just a sketch. And lastly, I'll just add in here just to define that bit, pressing a little bit harder, spin it round, something like that. And you can see now it looks kind of like we've got a cut going into our work. Of course, at this point now, we can start, well, we could start to, normally we'd probably add a bit of marker and tone to make it look a bit more 3D. If I just very quickly with a blue pencil, just add in a little bit of shadow, just to show as a different material. That's kind of the effect that we can achieve by starting with a 2-point perspective box and breaking the box down. In this video, we're just going to look at taking our 2-point perspective boxes and splitting the boxes or subdividing the boxes to become separate parts, separate pieces. So we could sketch something like this one to begin with, or just a standard box. So we'll just very quickly, I'll sketch a normal box. So let me just get my angles right. Okay, so there's my starting point. Okay, vertical line. Again, we'll start as normal with our bottom V. I'm going to just add for the sides of the box in this instance. So we'll just add parallel lines for this one. Okay, slightly wider on one side than the other. It doesn't really matter at all though. And then let's make a decision on where the top of the box is. So let's say about there. Let's get our sheet, let's flatten it. So if that's our angle before, let's turn our sheet so we've got a flatter angle. Something like that. That looks like they're going to meet over here. That's good. Let's spin it round. Okay, and that's the thing, is always just having a look and thinking, are they going to meet? You've got to try and get away from that parallel line. That one's a bit too flat now, too harsh. So let's try that one again. Perhaps something like that. It's definitely different than this one. That's good. So we've got a new point there. So then let's use that point. And again, there's the last line I drew. So let's flatten something like that. Okay, they're going to meet over here somewhere. And then lastly, we want this one coming over here. Probably something like that. So let's just sketch it in properly now. So there is let's have a look. This is the one line that we drew before. So we want that, but we want to flatten it ever so slightly. So perhaps something like that. And there's our box. So what we're now going to do, once we've got our box, is look at dividing the box up. Okay, so first of all, we'll pick a face to divide it on. So we'll divide this box on this side, okay, in this instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mark here on that line, and I'm just going to run a parallel line, pretty much parallel. Angle does slightly change, but I'll go across like that. So that's our line. And then I'm actually going to add a second one very close. So we're going to do this almost like a groove into our work. Okay, so we've got parallel lines in that instance. Then what we're going to do is we're going to drop, instead of dropping a vertical line, we're actually going to do it at an angle just to make it a little bit more interesting. So if there is a vertical line, something like that, we'll perhaps bring our diagonal line here. So what I'm going to do from this point, okay, so to do that, to sketch properly, I'm doing it from left to right, which is the angle that I tend to work at. Okay, something like that. And then I'm going to do the other one in a similar way. Okay, something like that. So now I've got these two extra lines. But what I want to do is make this look as though either it's two separate boxes or that we've got a groove cut out and then we've got another surface. So what I need to do is use this point here and this point here to kind of look at the angles of our perspective. So in this case, there is my angle. So what I want to do is get a very similar angle on the inside, okay? So something like that. Same on here, but we're not going to a perspective line, we're using this angle because we're trying to say that it would be the same. So if we imagine dropping that down on the inside, something like that. So that's going to give us that point there. So then what we need to do is just decide, is this a groove or is this a gap or a hole? So if we make it a groove, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to make it a little point here, and that point I'm then just going to follow my perspective lines that I've had before. And then this one, I'm actually going to do very much more slowly, just so you can see this, okay? And it's kind of, I suppose, more critical because we're trying to get the line just to get a little bit thinner as it goes towards the top of the groove here. And then we will just go across also over here to that point there. And then once we've got that, we can follow our existing points. Now, that's probably not very clear right now. In other words, we can't see it very easily. So I'm just going to press a little bit harder with my pencil now, just going over the top of this. So hopefully those lines become a little bit clearer. The problem when I press harder with a 0.7 mechanical pencil often is that the lead snaps, just like that. Okay, this is where, in actual fact, this is often where I use my other pencil, my 0.9, because the lead, just that little bit thicker, allows more pressure when sketching something like a darker line. So if I just, all I'm trying to do now is just pencil in those so you can see what's happening. Okay, we'll just go up there and we've got a thinner line here. It's just going to go up to that point. Okay, and we've got our inner corner here. So let's keep that going across to there. This one, there you go, snapping the lead again. This one needs to be much darker. This becomes like our thick line here. And then we're just trying to define these lines now with sharp lines or thin lines, just so things stand out a little bit. So this part now, I suppose, is very technical in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And often it can be hard to see it clearly, which is why we would use a little bit of shading. Now, of course, we could do that with marker. In this instance, I'm very, very quickly just going to do a little bit of diagonal shading very softly with my blue pencil, just so you can see this lip coming through and like trying to describe what is happening. So there's, as you can see now, that's like a cut. Of course, other things that we could do as well, should we wish, we can actually, using our existing shape, if we really wanted to, we could actually start manipulating this and bend it a little bit, which can become quite fun. So if I just show you what I mean by that is, if I use my point here and following my perspective line, but imagining from here perhaps that I have a curved surface, perhaps something like that. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to come out of my original perspective box. So I'm going to make this more like this kind of shape. Okay, so we've got a line coming out here, going through there to that point. So I'm going to keep the front of the box more or less where it was. Of course, I darkened this a moment ago, which ideally perhaps I should have waited. I'm just going to add that same kind of curve in here. And what we're going to do actually on this part is we're going to bring that front of that box down a little bit. Okay, so we're just curving it. So I'm going to add a little bit the back of the box now. So again, what I want to do now is look at my perspective line and think, right, okay, this needs to be slightly flatter because it's further away towards the back. So let's just go something like that. I'm going to swap pencils, so I've got my thinner pencil again. Okay, and just a bit nicer. So perhaps something like that, and then I might have my new point here, and let's just connect that. Okay, as I say, this is just kind of a bit of fun now really with the perspective, because the box and using the verticals was our original perspective, but by just moving a few lines we can of course start to play a little bit more. So again, let's just define one or two of these a little bit harder with my pencil. Let's get the front of this box, so we're going to do this, and of course once we move this curve our outer line changes, and actually our outer line now becomes here. So let's just pencil in something like that. Okay, so we now moved our box, and we can get our corner point here. We'll keep the corner sharp in this one. You could do a very subtle, like little rounded edge like that. Sometimes that softens the shape and just makes it perhaps a little bit nicer. So we've got the rest of the box. Okay, but what we're going to do now, so we've got this groove running through the box. I'm just a bit unhappy with this. There's like too many lines. So let's just carefully try and define a little bit more. Okay, a bit happier now. And again, I'm just trying to define this edge, and actually I'm going to make this a little bit darker just as we're working, so you can see that this will stand out a little bit more. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is look at adding a lip on this box here on the front of it, and then we're going to go in. So what I'm going to do is just sketch very lightly, going to follow vertical lines, and then I'm going to more or less follow what we already have. Let's say we won't go all the way to the top, we'll go drop it down a little bit more, perhaps something like that. Okay, so we've got this inner rectangle. So this is going to be a lip for the box. Now, because it's a lip, and if we apply the thick and thin lines rule, this edge here would be dark, because if something were on this edge and then it crawls round on this surface and it goes round inside, it disappears. Therefore, that's a thick line. Out here in Thailand, we have geckos. So a gecko going on this surface goes inside. I'd often talk about a spider, and a spider being on the surface and disappearing. So what I know is that line's not going to change. So trying not to break all the lead of my pencil, I'm just going to press a little bit harder, like so. Okay, so I know that line's not going to change. I also know that this top line will be the same, so we can define those and put those lines in. Now, inner lines, okay, so here we go. This is the inner line. So what we want to do now is on the inside of here, this is our line to the vanishing point. There's our line to the vanishing points, okay, from the inner part here of our edge, okay, just adding a slight little round there. Okay, so then what we want to do, we can now we've got what is our outer surface and what ultimately becomes a lip, we could start playing around with the inside of the shape perhaps a little bit more. So perhaps what we could do is we'll put a curve on. Okay, so we get this, and we'll make the front of this slightly rounded like that, and then let's put a point on that line and let's copy it. Okay, so we've got a similar kind of curve on the inside, and then let's go to this corner here, and then just to map the surface, just so you can see, that's as though that would go to that point. But the purpose of this is not to try and do a hollow box or a frame at this point. It was actually to potentially look at maybe modelling something on the inside. So if we add in, let's just use that, and again, following our perspective guides, let's say something like that. I'm just going to give it a slight chamfer. Oh, sorry, chamfer like that, and then like that. Okay, so I'm just looking at trying to add to my inner shape. So if I follow this line down, which would give me the back of the box, that would come here. So perhaps actually this shape, this object, it couldn't be any bigger than that point there. So let's just add that in. Let's drop that in there, something like that. And again, we could add more detail. So let's just, following our perspective guidelines, just showing you the principle with the lip again. So there is our shape following my perspective lines. This is the part that students often get wrong. They suddenly forget about perspective lines and just draw in a shape that they think is right. And often that's where it looks very wrong, because all edges connect to the vanishing points, pretty much. And that's a good rule to follow in terms of sketching in two-point perspective. So there's a basic shape. I'm just going to map that now to a similar surface so you'll be able to see. So I'll get a slight curve, perhaps something like that. And then let's just add in a little bit detail. And of course, we could add in a little bit of shadow, possibly just to start to define it. Maybe on something like this, we could sketch an ellipse, and if I do a second ellipse just above it, like here, then perhaps following our perspective lines, maybe we could, this becomes like some form of dial, button, circular thing sticking out, whatever you may wish it to be. But that's kind of like a quick principle of sketching that. And then what I would do is probably define this line a little bit further, so become a little bit darker in the line, and possibly then there's even opportunities where you may add a bit more cross-hatching, shadows, just to define things, because things will disappear, particularly with blue pencil, like in terms of they become more fuzzy, so you want to get that weight of line so that doesn't happen, ideally. Okay, so let's say something like this, just as you can see, pretty quick rough sketch. And let's just add in over here. And I would always darken this line at the bottom, because I always try to get objects to sit on the page. So I always say that the bottom of the object's always darker. So if we follow that rule, this line would always be a little bit thicker. There's a little bit of woolliness going on here, woolliness because it's not defined very clearly, so perhaps just a bit sharper line. Again, the outside line would be darker because the outer edges would be darker. And there's kind of like the idea, and after that, if you wanted to, is the type of thing you could always very, very quickly just add a little bit of shadow, that type of thing. And I'll just add a vertical one like that. And that's going to give you a split, okay, in the shape, in two-point perspective. And then we've done some inner detailing with the lip. And of course, I suppose a last detail as well, you could perhaps show different materials. If this was just going to remain as a sketch, you could maybe show perhaps a different material for the back, this back part here, by following almost with parallel lines to what you've already got, the shape, to add just a bit of tone in. Try not to get those kind of lines. You want to try and, as much as possible, keep them nice straight lines. Perhaps something like that. So all I'm trying to do is just show that this is different material than this one, for example. But normally I would then take this, I would use marker pen following this part here now. I would use marker pen on different surfaces, and of course I would add fine line pen and so on. So that is adding inner lip, a groove, or splitting surfaces together.